professional as far as committing to something and actually, making it through. But I knew what I was coming, what we were coming here for. Obviously, you didn't. I would be lying if I sat up here and knew that everything inside the bubble, what it would, the toll that it would take on your mind and your body, and everything else. Because it's been extremely tough. But I'm here for one reason and one reason only, and that's to compete for a championship. And that was my mindset once I entered the bubble.
I never saw those headphones before. Meanwhile, Hall of Famer Scottie Pippen with his thoughts on the bubble saying, quote, well, I'm going to be honest. It's not NBA basketball. It's not the hard grind. It's not the travel. It's not the fans. It's not the distractions. Really, to me, it's pickup basketball. It's going to the gym. Yeah, you already got your team. Y'all practicing together. Kendrick Perkins back here with us. Stephen A., do you agree or disagree with Scottie's comments?
I somewhat disagree with him, and I think being disrespectful. Temporaries. He did end his comments by saying he's enjoying it, it's entertaining, but I think it's being dismissive when he uses the words pickup basketball. Certainly these are different times. They're not what you customarily have to deal with. He was absolutely right in pointing out the absence of fans, the inability to travel, things of that nature, how you get to sleep in your same bed, you don't have to work in hostile confines, the noise, the crowd, the adrenaline. Those things are accurate, but we all understand the times that we're living in. And even though times are different, let's not take away from the great basketball that we have seen. It's not pickup basketball. It's organized basketball being played by professionals who've shown up and have made tremendous sacrifices to be there. And knowing that if you lose, you'd go home, yet seeing the amount of competitive matchups that we have seen, I think it's an opportunity and almost a mandate that we pay tribute to what we have seen from these players and these coaches. Denver, that was not a pickup team. Utah and Houston and L.A., both L.A. teams, even though they lost. Luka Doncic in Dallas, what we've seen in the Eastern Conference with Boston and Toronto and Miami, the list goes on and on. So I would say Scottie Pippen, I respectfully, he's a six-time champion. Jordan wouldn't have those titles if it were not for him. Mad respect and love for Scottie Pippen, but I respectfully disagree with how he has categorized these games. I don't agree with him at all.
I agree with Scottie Pippen. I think he's right to point out the differences. Forget about the use of the word pickup if you consider it disrespectful. He's describing it, right? And he's right. There are differences between this and a normal season. But is this harder or easier? In other words, the normal season has a certain kind of grind. This had a different kind of grind in the bubble that took a different kind of toll that he wouldn't know about because he hasn't experienced it. Actually, the players in the bubble, most of them have experienced both. And they can tell you what's different about it or what's harder about one or another. Or maybe one or another is actually harder, right? All things considered, according to the opinion of some. And those opinions may vary. But what he's describing sounds to me to be a fair way to describe things. Does that take away from the winner of the championship? No. Because the winner of the championship, everyone's going through the same thing, right? And even if he wants to argue or someone wants to argue, these conditions select out a different winner than would ordinarily be the case, well then, okay, fine. Like, survival of the best adapted to this situation. Fine. But let me ask you something. Does it seem like there would be other teams in the finals right now? No. In fact, Stephen A., you picked Miami. I think you'd have picked them whether or not there was a bubble, as did you, Perk, to come out of the East. And Lakers out of the West, you also picked them. And I don't think that had to do with a bubble. So if we're, in fact, getting the same teams we would get otherwise, and everyone's subjected to the same thing, then Scottie might be making a legitimate point. But in the end, it didn't have an effect on the who's playing in this game or in these games.
Well, Max, no, he's not. No, he's not. And you're wrong for siding with him. And he's being disrespectful. I got much love for and respect for Scottie Pippen. He's the top 50 greatest player of all time, but he's dead wrong for this. People sacrificed a lot to make this bubble happen, and he's disrespecting those people. People left their families during the pandemic, during the time where people were dying, to go down there and work and play the game of basketball. Also, you have examples like Montrezl Harrell, who his grandmother died, who was a dear part of his soul and dear part of his heart, his best friend. that he had to go down there and sacrifice after her death. We saw Jamal Murray break down in tears after a post-game interview. We heard Paul George talk about mental.
Let's take you live.
Hey, LeBron, just studying the Heat and what you've seen from them in this postseason, what's at the top of the list? What stands out the most to you about the way that they're playing basketball?
I would think two things. One, how hard they play for 48 minutes. No matter if they're up, no matter if they're down, they play extremely hard. And I think, two, it would be the way they move without the ball. They share the ball. Everyone is live on the floor. It's not one guy that you can disrespect or be off throughout the course of an offensive possession. And they do a hell of a job of moving without the ball, sharing the ball, cutting, passing. So those are the two things that stand out.
LeBron, you've described that time in Miami like it was going to college for you. If you can think back to those 4 years, what were the most important lessons that you learned about yourself and about leadership in general?
I think as far as leadership, that grows no matter where you are every day if you want to be a leader and if you strive to be a leader every day. And I think being around, Rouse and Spo, D. Wade and UD, and just to name a few, being a part of that culture allowed me to grow, allowed me to see, what it takes to not only compete for a championship but also to win a championship. So it definitely, put me in a position where I knew what it took. I saw what it took. But also, I fit that culture as well because of how hard I work. So it was a perfect match for those 4 years.
Hey, LeBron, it's Bill Oram. Would it have any extra meaning to you to win a championship against Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, guys that have helped shape you and vice versa in those years together?
Absolutely not. It's no extra meaning to winning a championship, no matter who you're playing against. It's already hard enough to even reach the finals, to be in this position. So if you're able to become victorious out of the finals, it doesn't matter who it's against. I'm just happy that I'm here with the opportunity, to represent not only myself, but represent our fans, our fan base, our organization, my teammates, our coaching staff, our training staff, and so many others that represent this organization to the utmost respect.
Allison?
Dave McMenamin?
LeBron, 6 years after playing for Miami, how do you feel about Pat Riley?
That's such a broad question, Dave. I don't understand.
Leaves it open for interpretation. Like, when you hear the name Pat Riley, what do you think about? How do you describe your relationship?
When I hear the word
today?
Pat Riley, you think about probably one of the greatest minds that this game has ever had. He's won at every level. Seen a stat the other day that he's been part of a championship in 4 decades. This league is not the same without Rouse. So, he's a great guy, great motivator, but someone that just knows what it takes to win, and he's shown that over the course of 40 years.
Kyle Goon?
LeBron, you talked about just sort of the difficulty of adapting to the bubble. How much have you sort of motivated yourself by reflecting that, your teammates are taking cues from you and trying to see, how you approach things and sort of approach kind of getting through this grind of 3 months here?
It's probably been the most challenging thing I've ever done as far as a professional, as far as committing to something and actually, making it through. But I knew what I was coming, what we were coming here for. Obviously, you didn't. I would be lying if I sat up here and knew that everything inside the bubble, what it would, the toll that it would take on your mind and your body, and everything else. Because it's been extremely tough. But You know, I'm here for one reason and one reason only, and that's to compete for a championship. And that was my mindset once I entered the bubble, once I entered the quarantine process the first 2 days. And then right from our first practice, my mindset was to, if I'm going to be here, make the most of it and see what you can do and lock in on what the main thing is. And the main thing was for us to finish the season and compete for a championship. So that's just been my mindset. You know, throughout these, I don't even know how many days it is. Whatever how many days it is, it feels like 5 years. So it really doesn't matter. But I've been as locked in as I've ever been in my career.
Dan?
I won't remind you how many days it is. Back in March, the season comes to an end. 2 players on your team test positive for this virus. Did you know, or when did you think getting to this point was even a possibility? And what was it like kind of mourning the fact that maybe it wouldn't happen?
I didn't know that this was a possibility until we actually got on the plane in LA to fly here to Orlando. You know, we had seen some of the teams arrive before us. We had got here July 9th. We had seen some of the teams arrive a couple of days before us. But until we landed here and got off the plane to the hotel, that's when it became a reality to me.
All right, Malika?
LeBron, from your vantage point, what do you think it is about Erik Spoelstra that allows him, no matter if it's coaching number 1 picks or kind of a collection of undrafted / lower drafted guys, that allows him to continue to bring groups back here to the finals, but also not necessarily always be in the conversation with that upper echelon of coaches?
Well, that's a